Alright, so this video is going to act as my reflection for the shareable resource assignment. Um, I guess I'll give a brief overview of what I did. I made a PowerPoint that's focusing on the referral process and identifying students with disabilities, specifically made for teachers. So throughout the resource, I sort of give some background to the issues, some factors that could signal that a student has disabilities, and then go through the referral process. What does it look like? What are the steps that need to be taken? Who needs to be informed? Who needs to be part of the process? Things like that. So in deciding a topic, I didn't really have much trouble deciding a topic. I pretty much knew that I wanted to talk about the referral process because it's the one I had the most questions about. Because I was, thinking for myself, when I become a teacher, how am I going to how am I going to be able to identify, students who might have disabilities which haven't been caught, which haven't, they've sort of slipped through the cracks, they haven't been identified or diagnosed, or if they just start, showing symptoms when they are in my classroom. So I sort of want to know, like, what does that process look like? What's involved with it? And I learned some very interesting things, and I feel more informed about the topic thanks to the research I did creating this resource. And I hope this resource can be used to, help other people out who have similar questions to me. In terms of considerations I made for my audience, it's I was making them for teachers. Teachers have very, very little free time, as I've been, learning throughout my student teaching placement. So I tried to make it as concise as possible. Just sort of like slim down the information and sort of strike out the most core elements, the most important elements, because most of the resources that I found in my research, most of the sources that I used for creating the project are very wordy, and very intense in their language and their word count. So I tried to sort of shorten it and make it very bulleted and very to the point. I'd say the most challenging part for me was distilling all the information that I got, because there's a lot out there, especially in terms of the referral process and identifying students with disabilities or students who may have disabilities, and what's the difference between just a student who's identifying or who's struggling academically, or a student who does have a disability that they need accommodations for. So there's a lot of great information out there. There's a lot of great facts, a lot of great figures that I didn't include into the presentation because I want to make it as concise as possible and just include what I felt as the most important information. But again, I did have these resources that I didn't end up using. So what I did as sort of a compromise is I threw in a slide at the end where it's like, if you want to learn more about this topic, I included 2 resources that people could look at and sort of read more about. That's the article by the researcher at Iowa State, and the other one is a website which is dedicated for informing teachers about students with disabilities. For revising the assignment in future semesters, I thought that the actual explanation of what we had to do, what was expected of us, I thought that was very clear, and I was able to follow that pretty well. I guess one comment I have is if it's at all possible to sort of switch this and the first person assignment, because I felt like we talked about the IEPs closer to when the first person assignment was due than when this assignment was due. So it would be like sort of switching around the due dates, where it make the first person assignment the second assignment that's given, and then this one the first one, because it deals with more of the IEP process, which was earlier on in the course. So that would just be one suggestion I have. If it's possible to make that adjustment at all. That's just something that came to mind for me, is that I feel like it'd be more, impactful to do it when it's closer to when we're learning about IEPs and how they're made and the process involved in that. And then finally, the sources that I used to create my resource. So I drew on 3 main ones. Not including the extra ones that I included. I sort of briefly mentioned those. So A big one that I used was the National Center for Learning Disabilities, their website. They had some great information, some great graphics. I think some of them were actually included in the first presentation that we had on the first day of class. I sort of recognized a few graphs and things like that. They have some great figures. They have some great information there. I mainly use that for the background portion of the resource, coming up with those, or including those numbers about, you know, how many students have to repeat a grade and how many of those students have an undiagnosed disability. That was really something that stuck out to me and something I thought I should include. Then another resource that really helped me was from the Child Mind Institute, which is a nonprofit that's based out of New York City, and it's for helping, you know, students with learning disabilities. And there's the article on there that I used that was explaining the different or warning signs for possible students with disabilities, or, you know, if students would present these sort of, you know, warning signs, that could be an indicator that they, you know, have a disability. So that's what I used for that, and I picked, you know, four of the you know, the categories, and there's more in the article. I just picked those four because I felt like those are some of the more common ones. But of course, I linked the resource itself in my citations in the resource. So if you know, if they want to see more about, like, you know, certain things that could be indicators for disabilities, I include that in there as well. And then the third one was Project Ideal, which is a website to help teachers learn more about, you know, how disability in schools, you know, how does that, you know, how do we deal with that, you know, the process and things like that, you know, all that stuff, you know, working with students with disabilities. And it was created with the help of the Texas Council rather for developmental disabilities. They helped with creating that resource. So it's a website similar to the one that I linked in the presentation, the one that I didn't use, the additional resource that I linked to. It's a very similar sort of idea where it's like, you know, has all these resources for helping students with disabilities. This one I used for the referral process. They had a very good in-depth explanation of what the referral process looks like. So that's the resource I used for that. So that's pretty much it. Overall, like I said before, I learned a lot about this process, and I feel like I'm more informed.